It was about 4 months ago. I went up to one of the sessions at Park, and Dan was the speaker. And when I sat there and listened and heard the presentation about how the world can evolve and how we can all work together more productively and use this network to make us effective, I just knew it was something that we wanted to talk about here. So I'm very happy that he was able to make it, and I give you Dan Rasmus.
Thank you very much. And since they're all over, I guess I should put a reminder of the question. Yeah, I came in from Southern California this morning, and this is a talk that kind of evolves over time, just like everything else that we do. I'll talk a little bit about evolution and adaptation as we go through this afternoon. If I can find the right button here to push and get my presentation going. Here we go. It's very interesting, as you know, Bill was talking about the internet and the hope that we had for connecting people. And recently there was a study done on the SARS virus that said AIDS took several years to figure out what the genome was and what the virus was that was actually involved in the disease, and SARS took about 6 weeks because of the connections between the labs. But what's interesting that's not told in that story, it's a great internet story because the information was being posted, it was very public, Centers for Disease Control and various research organizations throughout the country, but they were looking at each other. They were looking at each other all the time. And therefore trying to find information at places that they expected to find it. And that's great. I mean, that was very much an information sharing. What I'm going to talk about this evening is what happens when you don't know what information you're looking for. Because I do take all of the computer companies and most of the software companies to task. Because as we've evolved, and I have been doing this now since the pre-PC days, we were talking earlier about, I cut my teeth on Burroughs B17 and B1800s running MRP systems on 512K of RAM, back when we wrote phishing programs. We've done absolutely nothing to change the relationship between people and computers. Right? We have not given the computer extended capabilities for helping us manage our information. And I mean that on the interpersonal level. Right? So we have faster computers, different user interfaces, but they don't manage our information for us in terms of I just kind of submit something to the computer, it will self-organize it, put it in the right places, tell the right people about it. And now we're starting to see information management systems that are evolving in that arena. And what that brings to, and most of the time my audience is IT directors. And these are promises that IT directors and IT managers and CIOs make all the time. They want to provide the right information at the right time, the right place, the right person, the right form. And that's most charters from enterprise IT organizations have some form of that statement in their mission statement. They promise end users and promise the business units that that's what they're going to deliver. And they can't do it. Because what happens is they go out and they send armies of systems analysts or business analysts or whatever you want to call them into the field to figure out what people are going to need. And then they start doing things like this, right? They say, well, the way we're going to give you all the information is we're going to put it all on one screen, and everything you will ever need is all in one place. We tried to find the worst possible portal implementation we could find, and this was one of them. It was just, you know, there's too much stuff, and it actually scrolls off the bottom, as you can see, and there's more information there than you can imagine. And it's, you know, from the user interface side, because we have scroll bars, we can keep adding stuff to the bottom of web pages until we have everything we want right there, which then means we have to search through our content. And then we have to think about the question of the right time. How are people being presented with this information, and where do they want to be disturbed? Their morning commute, during a meeting, or watching soccer practice, right? Because we all have cell phones that now have either something from CDP, from Sprint, or GSM and GPRS from AT&T and Verizon and others. So we can get the internet and we can get pinged. I was standing in England. I went out and bought this phone because it was a world phone. So I'm standing in England and I'm getting a message that somebody wanted to join my Yahoo list, right, for instant messaging. I had been IMing somebody, and I guess I didn't log off all the way. It was back to being a regular cell phone, but then I got a message saying that somebody wanted to join my Yahoo friends list. So we see that these messages can be pervasive information, and requests can be interruptive in terms of how we manage our time. And then we have a question about who you are, right? I worked with Jonathan Penn, one of our analysts, and we came up with this list as being the places that you have an identity on the network in an enterprise. And so when the system is trying to figure out to tell you something that's going on, which you does it tell? Right? How are you logged in? Where are you? What information is it trying to do? What context are you in? And these are all the different places that your directory, your identity within the enterprise exists. And then you have the place, right? So as you're wandering around and you're doing various things, you also have the place that you are. And that is very closely related, of course, to time as well, because you may be commuting different places. But do you want the context of, I'm at a hotel on vacation, so I now have the combination of the wrong time and the wrong place, but yet somebody can invade that with the information that I want. Or am I sitting in a conference room and it looks at my calendar and decides what kind of project I'm working on and says, gee, we just made this agreement with somebody, and here's the information, and you've got the right stuff right there sitting in the meeting. That you may want it to do. This is me wandering around Colorado Springs last year at GigaWorld with a Cybernaut Poma. It's a Windows CE with a heads-up display. Very cool product. And then the right form, right? How do we get this stuff to people? Again, when we look at traditional systems analysis, a lot of stuff used to be on paper. And I remember working on a print reduction program at Hughes that saved $6 million. And what that $6 million savings did was fund our early internet research, right? Internal delivery of information. But we literally reduced paper, right? We took out forms, we renegotiated rates with data centers and all kinds of stuff. It was all paper-based. Systems analysts in the field walking up to report drops and saying, why isn't this report being picked up? Figuring out who it went to and figuring out what they did with it and if they needed it anymore. And one of the first projects we did was we would ask people, gee, what do you do with that? And they'd say, well, we open this up to page 47, and my manager is responsible for that department, and I type these numbers into Excel and create a pie chart. That's all you do with this whole stack. That's all I do. And so we started delivering. One of our first things was we took data out of WSF2 on a mainframe, pumped it into OpenMDF services on the other side, and created an Excel spreadsheet that we then FTP'd down to a Novell server so that that person could open the spreadsheet and all they had to do was highlight the stuff and create a pie chart. Right, so we save that kind of stuff. But it's the right, data comes in all kinds of forms, and as we move to various devices, what am I using right now? What's the context of the work? So context extends back into the device as well. So the other thing that happens when you're out in the systems analysis world is you're trying to guess what people are going to do. And that led us to role-based user interfaces, right? If you're doing a certain job, then you must need this kind of information. And what we find out is people are not doing the same jobs all the time. And we can't anticipate, because we live in a very chaotic world, what people are going to need moment to moment. So that led us to this thinking of adaptive workspaces. And what I mean by adaptive, and there are many kinds of adaptation in nature. I promised a couple people that I would show dinosaurs tonight, so here are the dinosaurs. They've recently discovered in China dinosaurs that for no good reason have feathers. Right? So there's this ongoing controversy, are birds dinosaurs? I personally believe they are. We can have a religious battle later. But I personally believe that dinosaurs are birds. But anyway, so they evolved feathers. They were not necessarily for flight. They don't know what they were for. Maybe display, maybe for insulation. But that's not the kind of adaptive that we're dealing with. And then wings with strange formatting. Wings were another adaptation, right? Once you had feathers, there were the ability to evolve flight characteristics, and some of the dinosaurs / birds figured out how to fly. But in the information space, it's much more moment to moment. It's the adaptation of the feather to the wind in the air that it's flowing through. We want to be able to have our information space deliver us the right kind of information in the context that we're working in. So user interfaces evolve from very generic, 3270 and let's see, what do I remember? ADM3A terminals and Tektronix green screens that couldn't do text, but they did great graphics. And that was the user interface, right? If we walked up to a PDP 1170, we had an ADM3A terminal sitting in front of it, and we didn't have much of a choice on what our user interface looked like. It was the same user interface for everybody, and we usually, if we did anything, we created some forms for somebody. And that was good enough for anybody who used it, the same forms for everybody. And then we decided that roles were something. People have certain jobs, and we could identify things with roles. And I remember going back, this is certainly a big issue in the portal world, continues to be the way people develop portals right now. I remember people creating role-based user interfaces in Office Vision and in All-in-One and HP Desk and other places where you could customize the environment and provide people with those kinds of interfaces. And then you kind of let them do this themselves, create their own interfaces. It was interesting, I was at a bank in the Midwest, and they were in the process of converting just 2 years ago from Office Vision, IBM's email and Office product, to Lotus Notes. And they had allowed high customization, and they were a little bit below budget, but they were looking at about 20-some thousand or more workflows and custom screens and forms and other things that they had allowed people to create over the years. And they were dealing with the issue of how do they convert all of that business knowledge into Lotus Notes, and then they also were trying to figure out what was relevant to them. Right? There was no context for all these business processes. They just existed. There was no version control. There was no ownership metadata. They were just, and they had to go around and look at each one of them and decide, who needed them, how often were they executed, and all that kind of stuff. So it was a very interesting customization issue. And then personalization. Let's take customization to the next level, which is will allow you to personalize the data that's in there as well and what you deliver through rules and other things. And we think the future is going to be the idea of adaptive workspaces. Right? How do we allow information to pick up clues from our environment? Yes?
What's the difference between customized and personalized?
Customized is that I can change the widgets on the screen, and personalized is I can actually change the content and the logic behind the portlets.
One's a kind of user interface layer and one's a deeper layer.
Right, one's a slightly deeper layer. You can customize, it's kind of, all of these go backwards. So I can customize, I can create a user interface with a personalized system that nobody could personalize. I could turn that feature off and it could look like a green screen if I wanted to. But yeah, that's personalizing the information as well. So the adaptive interfaces is, how do I get the information in the context that I'm working? How do I pick up the clues from my environment and use those clues to feed into the information space so that I can see the information? IBM is starting to move in the direction of what I call uber personalization. And this is, see if we can get this thing to work. They have a number of different pieces, virtual teaming and awareness. What we find interesting, though, is as we look at all of these, and I'll use awareness as an example. And let's see if we get the pen working here. Oops. Okay, 1 second. I love new technology. I'm learning before your eyes. Let's see.
This is the world we're going to.
This is the word. There we go. How about that? So this is Office 2003, which I just installed the second beta, so there are a few things that changed. And it was nice of Microsoft to actually go to a second beta. I think this is one of the few times that they've done that. So we may actually get code that works the first time they ship it as real code. I didn't say it, sorry for any Microsoft employees. But anyway, so the awareness piece is personal, your personal buddy list, friends list, depending on your instant messaging product. But these are trusted relationships that we build, right? This is, when I say personalization, they have decided that they want to put in an instant messaging piece through customization into their portal